All right. All right. Good morning again, everyone. Welcome to the We the People National Finals Challenge. My name is Donald Lanier. I am the state coordinator for the state of South Carolina, and I'm delighted to be here with you today, along with our Unit 3 judging panel. In just a moment, I'm going to have our judges introduce themselves, and then we would like you to introduce yourselves as well as your teacher coaches. The judges will then read their question, and upon the first spoken word, your 4 minutes of prepared response will begin. I will hold up the 1 minute and stop time cards. Judges, likewise, at minutes number 9 and 10, I will do the same thing. So, judges, take it away.
All righty, I am Hank Chambers, and I'm the only one of the judges who wasn't muted a second ago. I'm down at the University of Richmond, and I teach law down here.
Hi, my name is Thomas Mackey. I'm in the history department at the University of Louisville, as well as with the Brandeis School of Law at U of L.
Good morning. I'm Rita McCannon. I'm from Huntsville, Alabama, and I'm thrilled to death that you all have worked so hard to do this today, and I'm glad you're here to represent my state.
Morning, y'all.
Good morning.
Yeah.
My name is Amaria Thurston, and I will be attending Columbia University in the fall, where I will be majoring in political science and economics.
Good morning. My name is Eileen Wu, and I'll be attending MIT, where I'll be studying math.
And I'm for Balo. I'll be attending the University of the South in the fall, where I plan on majoring in economics and political science. And these are our wonderful teachers, Miss Jane Schaefer and Miss Amy Maddox. And we're so excited to be here today.
We're delighted to see you guys, and so let's get started, eh?
Sounds good.
There we go. Let me read the question. The question is number 3 of Unit 3. In 2020, we celebrate the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which recognized the right of women to vote. Despite recent controversy, the Equal Rights Amendment has not yet been declared ratified. What are the similarities and differences between these two amendments? What impact, if any, has the 19th Amendment had on women in achieving equality with men in the United States and around the world? What are the advantages and disadvantages of states passing their own equal rights amendments rather than ratifying a national constitutional amendment? You may begin.
Hurrah and vote for suffrage. Be a good boy and help Miss Cat put the rat in ratification. In the summer of 1920, Phoebe Burns sent this letter to her son Harry, a Tennessee state legislator, convincing him to cast the final vote to ratify the 19th Amendment. Then Representative Byrne fled to the State House attic to escape an angry anti-suffragist mob, but today he's celebrated as a hero.
The 19th Amendment, drafted by Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, was the largest extension of voting rights in U.S. history, increasing the number of voters by over 40%. Later, American suffragettes inspired Brazilian feminist Bertha Lutz to include women's rights in the 1945 UN Charter. Despite the passage of the 19th, Native American and Asian American women could not vote until granted citizenship by the 1924 Indian Citizenship Act and the 1952 McCarran-Walter Act. And many women still faced barriers like poll taxes and literacy tests until the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Despite the passage of the 19th, women were still treated as inferior. States excluded women from jury service in the name of respecting family obligations, and women earned only 60% of men's pay in 1971, which is when Representative Martha Griffiths resurrected the Equal Rights Amendment to combat gender inequality. Originally written by Alice Paul in 1923, the ERA would prevent the denial of equal rights based on sex, extending the ideals of the 19th.
While the 19th and the ERA both target sex-based discrimination, the amendments differ in purpose and path. The 19th unlocked the door to equality. The more expansive ERA aims to fully open it. The amendments were also received differently. While the 19th was won by women's efforts, the ERA was defeated by them. In 1972, Phyllis Schlafly and other conservative women launched the Stop ERA campaign, warning it would gut existing privileges for women like Social Security benefits for stay-at-home mothers and draft exemptions. The movement thwarted the ERA's ratification. It was only 3 states short before its 1982 deadline.
Yet, the Nevada legislature ratified the ERA in 2017, with Illinois and Virginia following in 2018 and 2020, sparking controversy about whether the ERA is ratified or if it even can be. Meanwhile, 26 states have passed their own equal rights amendments, exemplifying states' 10th Amendment power to protect people's rights where the federal government has failed to act. For example, in Holmes v. Holmes 2013, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court invalidated a statute limiting how much alimony ex-wives could receive based on the state's ERA. States serve as so-called laboratories of democracy whose results could demonstrate whether the ERA would be effective on a national level. However, relying on state equal rights amendments creates inconsistency. For example, same-sex couples could have their marital rights invalidated before the court's decision in 2015's Obergefell v. Hodges mandated all states honor same-sex marriages. Until the courts clarified the confusion around the ERA's sunset provision, states arguably have a better chance at preventing sex-based discrimination by passing their own equal rights amendments rather than trying to resuscitate a long-expired proposal.
From state referenda to national amendments to international movements, the battle for women's rights has lasted for centuries, but we are still far from true equality. The ratification of the 19th illustrates that sometimes all it takes to change the fate of the world is one person's courage to speak up for what is right, like Representative Byrne, who chose to be a good boy and listen to his mother. Thank you. We are now ready for your questions.
Yeah. Interesting. It's a nice story of the putting Tennessee over the top there. Let me ask a question here that I'm thinking about the ERA that you've been talking about, but also the 14th Amendment, but particularly the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Because of the Equal Protection Clause, do we even need an Equal Rights Amendment? If so, why? If not, why?
So I think that's a very common question that's been asked. And I think that even looking back historically, when you look at the 15th Amendment and the 19th Amendment, which expanded voting rights after the 14th Amendment had come out, I think that those would have probably been able to come about through the 14th Amendment, but that we felt that it was important to explicitly write down those rights because we didn't want them to be, we didn't want any fuzziness surrounding the law. And so we wanted it to clarify. And so I think that the ERA would kind of serve as a clarifying agent.
I definitely think that if we had an ERA, it could still have a huge impact on how we decide things. The ERA would clarify that it would be like without a doubt that there would be equality between the sexes. And I think that in the future, it could also change the outcome of certain court cases. For example, I think if we saw another abortion case go to the Supreme Court, with the ERA, we would see a significantly different decision than if we didn't have one.
How come?
Yeah.
Oh, so in the case of Roe v. Wade, it was decided based on this implied right of privacy, which wasn't even explicitly written in the Constitution. And having an ERA would definitely make the case stronger. And in addition, Justice Ginsburg has said in the past that she believed the abortion case should be decided on equal protection from the 14th. So I think if we had oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So I think if we had the Equal Rights Amendment, that would make the case even stronger.
So this is one of those interesting cases. Isn't pregnancy and abortion, aren't those cases where you really have to treat men and women differently?
Yeah, I guess in the case of abortion, I think that's what Justice Ginsburg's logic was about saying how it should be based on equal protection. Since abortion is an issue that only applies to women, it should be decided based on the Equal Protection Clause.
Okay, can we decide it based on the Equal Protection Clause now, or do we have to have an ERA in order to decide the issue in the way Justice Ginsburg wants to?
You could definitely go ahead and use the 14th Amendment and apply it that way. It would require that a court take a case, though, in order to be able to look at that issue. So we saw our own state, Alabama, create an abortion law that was pushing kind of the boundaries. And the goal of that was supposedly to put a case in the Supreme Court so that they could challenge Roe and see if they could get it decided a different way, but the court has kind of refused to answer that question. They've said that Roe is set law. So until we get a change in the makeup of the court and they decide they want to answer that question, I don't think we'll see it change how it was applied.
And to add on to Ford's point, I think that we still can decide it on a 14th Amendment equal protection basis, but with an ERA, that would ideally move the level of judicial scrutiny that we apply to sex-based classifications from intermediate scrutiny, where it is now, to strict scrutiny. So if the court were to change and finally hear such a case, then they would apply more strict, rigorous judicial scrutiny.
Why don't we have more women elected to public office if we've got the 19th Amendment and we've got women have the right to vote? Why haven't we elected more women? Why don't we have a woman president?
I think that I think these things just take time. For example, if we look at the example of the 19th, after we passed the 19th Amendment, the impact wasn't immediate. In fact, it wasn't until second wave feminism, a generation later, that women actually began to take advantage of the 19th Amendment and began actually casting their votes.
I think it also...
Oh, go ahead.
I think it also kind of revolves around how the public views it. So I think that the public tends to vote for who they believe is the best candidate, whether it be based, they don't want to base their decision off of sex always. And so I think that that's been an issue and a barrier in some ways, is looking at who's run. So I think that when there's a really, really highly qualified woman that runs for office, I think we'll see a female president in the next 10 years.
So you all mentioned Brazilian feminists. Brazil didn't give their women the right to vote until after the 19th Amendment, yet they've had a Brazilian prime minister. Are we just slower than Brazil when it comes to equality?
I don't think we're necessarily slower, we're just different, just because of the way that our electoral system works. I believe that it's harder for, I mean, just with these past 2 or 3 elections, or even 4, you see how difficult it is for candidates that aren't the typical model. May I finish my thought?
Absolutely.
The typical, white man to rise up into power. And so I think that we're still just on our way.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, we've got the stop sign here. This turns out to be, on its surface, it looks like an easy enough question, but in fact, you start digging, it turns out this is a pretty difficult question. It deals with both constitutional structure, it deals with legal principles, but also, as we were just chatting about, cultural change. And what comes first, legal change or cultural change? And then how does that then affect the larger legal constitutional worlds in which we live in? And I think you did a nice job of, especially in the discussion, of rounding out that idea of both the complexity, but the give and take between legal change and cultural change. So I thought that was very strong, and I really appreciated hearing it.
Yeah, I agree. It's a tough issue, right? And it's a tough issue because when we think about equality, we think, well, okay, should we treat everyone equally? Should we treat women the way they should be treated? Should we treat men the way that they should be treated? Right. So raising the abortion question, really interesting one, because if the ERA is about treating folks equally, it's hard to treat a man equally when it comes to abortion.
Right.
Because we don't get pregnant. Right. So it becomes a tough question to apply to, but we understand the notion being we want to make sure women have the same abilities and the same rights as men to flower as well as men do. And as a consequence, how we deal with abortion raises that issue. So it's a fascinating issue. And certainly the notion that it takes time. At some point we say, how long? Right? We've had 100 years with the 19th Amendment. How long? Alice Paul suggested the ERA 3 years after the 19th Amendment was ratified. How long does it take? So real interesting stuff, good conversation.
I was really impressed that you had so much history. You pointed out so many different points in our history when we've made baby steps. I'm tired of baby steps. I appreciate what you all have put out there, but it taking time, I guess, to follow along on what Hank said. It's going to be on you all. It's going to be on your generation to figure this out. And I would argue with you a little bit about qualified women. I think we've actually had some qualified women even 30 and 40 years ago. I think our society is maybe not so confident that a woman can handle a job. And I would argue with you on that too. So, but thank you. Y'all have just really, really prepared, and I'm proud of you, and I'm proud you're from Alabama. And I'm really glad that you made this effort. I know this is tough times we're in, and oh my gosh, to make this effort when you didn't have to, you could have just stayed home and watched TV. I'm just really, really thankful that you made such a great effort.
Yeah, good work, folks. Appreciate the hard work and interesting discussion here this morning. Thanks again.